We're back with Therapy is Dope with Alicia and Laura, and we were just discussing how our relationship in general is just an adventure. And today we're inviting Katrina Ostmeyer on our adventure with us. So good luck to everyone.
Yeah, that checks out. It's like a friendly welcome. If you survive, you belong.
Here
I love
we
this.
go. This is a Sink or Swim podcast, dang it.
Yeah.
All right, Katrina, getting to you. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background of who you are and how you got to doing what you're doing?
Sure. I am a licensed psychologist and a board certified behavior analyst. And I specialize in working with systems, children, families, and essentially every community around them to help improve functioning. I got here, like so many things in my life, I kind of fell into opportunities. I didn't even know I wanted to do psychology till about a semester and a half before I graduated college. So that was a whirlwind.
I love
Figured it
that
out.
though, because I feel like so many people think they need to know what they're going to do in high school, in middle school,
Mm,
and it's just not realistic.
It's
No.
not. I've been trying to tell my 15-year-old this, like, I was like, you, whatever you decide is going to be different. It's
Yeah.
fine.
It's like, what's your start point? That's it.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
it will tell you where you want to go.
Yeah. Or you just fall into some jobs and you start working. And that's what I did is I started working in a treatment home with EBD or emotionally behavioral disturbed youth in college as a teaching parent,
Oh.
which is ironic because I was 19 when I started that job.
Huh.
But fell in love with it, fell in love with behavior analysis, decided if I went behavior analysis, I just end up working with kids with autism, doing early intensive behavioral intervention. So I was like, I'll go to grad school for psychology. Kind of amazing. I got in. I don't really know how I did that, but my master's program decided I loved research, that I wanted to have a research career. So I did a PhD program, had a baby in that PhD program, and decided maybe my life and my identity didn't have to be what I did,
Hmm.
and had a job waiting for me here in Kansas City. And so came back, started working for a not-for-profit, trying to extend evidence-based services for kids with autism and their families. Thought it was my forever job, realized it wasn't. Love the people, love the place, just not what I wanted to do being an administrator the rest of my life. So started a private practice by getting in my minivan and driving across the state of Kansas to provide services to youth and families with complex behavioral profiles. Decided to open my first clinic during the pandemic. And now I focus on trying to um, fill surface gaps, essentially. This is a really short story, sorry. for these for kids who maybe are missed within our typical service models. And so
I feel like
that's
there's a
that's
lot of holes in our typical systems, so I imagine you're very busy.
yes. Well, I also am currently I'm working out of my position at the University of Kansas. I'm currently a full-time professor of the practice there, run our training clinic for clinical child psychology there,
Right.
which I love and plan to still be involved in some way, shape, or form. But having two kids now who also have some needs, I'm like, yeah, maybe one job's good.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe,
Because technically
maybe.
it's like three, mom, private practice, and
Mhm.
professor. Are we counting
Sort of.
mom as a job by now? Because I feel like we
Well, it
should.
should be. It should
Yeah.
be. But,
Yeah.
you know,
Anywho, that's not the point of the conversation. God, there's so many jump off points. The holes in the typical system. Let's start there because I think it can, as you express kind of what you've seen, what they are, what you do to kind of help educate and create more dynamic systems that are all encompassing, so to speak. I think it can also help adults and some of our listeners who may have some neurodivergence who have worked in the system with the holes who just felt like they were doing something wrong or they didn't understand, so they were the problem, hopefully have some compassion for themselves. So, what are the holes that you kind of see, and what are like the operations that you kind of run to fill the holes.
Yeah. And I think it's been really enlightening for me because my children both have ADHD and some emotional behavioral needs. So doing this as a professional, then also as a parent. And then everybody who's got neurodivergent children, of course, looks back at their youth and they're like, oh yeah, okay, there were signs, but that's fine.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about wholes, I always talk a lot about I start with systems and attitudes, right?
Okay.
Because where I really started my practice was working with school districts and families, and then with some of these cases, working with community mental health centers, trying to serve these really complex cases.
Mhm.
And the very first thing that I recognized is how much service providers, even though we have all this training and everything, people go back to what are their values and their attitudes towards certain behaviors or mental health. They're like, and how they perceive behavior. So,
Mm.
as a behavior analyst, I'm going to look at behavior and say, what function does it have, right? And why does that behavior need to occur in this context? Is there a better behavior I can use? Or, do we need to change something in this system
Yeah.
so the child feels like they can be successful? But sometimes you come into attitudes, and I had this experience with my daughter who has some, she's a little rigid and she has some emotional uh, dysregulation at times, and she has some great tools that if the system helps her use them, she can manage it and not be quite so different from her peers and have fewer social difficulties.
Mm.
And what I've run into in different contexts sometimes is like the attitudes of the adults of like, well, you shouldn't need a break. This is not that hard. I'm like, kid needs a break to regulate because she's got too much coming in. And I even had an experience over the summer where we had a 2 week summer camp and I had to have a powwow with the instructors and say, like, look, I understand at 10 years old, the expectation is she pushed through. She's got the strength. I was like, the reality, she doesn't right now. And it will come. She has ADHD, maturation happens. She'll figure it out. We're teaching tools. But at this time, these are the tools she has and she can use successfully. So I think attitudes is the
Mhm.
first thing that I come to. And knowing that, and sometimes we have to change attitudes when we're looking at some of those changes in the system. I think another piece that I look at is um, trying to also consider interventions not for a person. So, one thing that often comes up is a question of like, oh, who's the client, right? And we need to do everything for the client. And when we build out systems for a single individual, that can be problematic because there's lots of cogs and pieces in every system, right? And when I think of, I'm married to an engineer, my dad's an engineer. Sorry, when I talk about humans, I also talk about machines.
Yeah.
It happens, but those different pieces have to work and they have to work together. So if I build a system for this one piece, but it's stressing the rest of that system, it's going to break and fall apart.
Mhm.
And so that's another place where I see for a lot of places like we need to consider, the needs for everyone in that system. So whether that be in a classroom, all the students in the classroom, and that student who has some differing needs, right? How do I make what we're doing for everybody fit most people pretty well, but then be flexible enough that we can go on a different process for somebody else?
Yeah.
For the teacher, making sure that, this is reasonable. Because if I'm asking you to do too much, maybe you're successful for a couple weeks, but then your behavior is going to fall off and you're not going to be successful managing this anymore. Or you're going to be so tired and grumpy that you start snapping at kids. I've been there. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm tired and irritable. So I think those are some of the things. It's like taking a minute to kind of like check ourselves for our attitudes. And then also, how do we um, make this work for, the greater good, essentially, while also not letting people fall through the cracks.
Mm.
No, I love that. I love the like I love systems thinking and like seeing how pushing one button influences other buttons and how
Mhm.
every behavior we have, whether we like it or not, serves a purpose. Like we are very adaptable creatures. So like if we're doing something, it's doing something for us, whether it's
Mhm.
regulating, getting attention, isolating, who
Mhm.
knows based on where we're at. That's where the curiosity comes in. But what I really
Mhm.
like about it is this actually happened with my husband a couple of years ago. He did like an online schooling course for
Mhm.
cybersecurity. And before he did that, he had this narrative that he's not good in school,
Oh,
traditional, right?
uh-huh.
And then he did the online course. And I remember after like the first month, he's like, you know how I used to think that? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I don't know if that's true. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you've never done this. And I've done a lot of online schooling since then.
Uh-huh.
Like, yeah, no, the system definitely didn't work for everybody. It doesn't mean you're
Mhm.
dumb. It doesn't mean you're bad in school. It just means that
Mhm.
you have different ways of learning. And like, I almost wish that was more of the focus in schools is like, how do you understand things? How do you learn versus
Mhm.
like consume this content and regurgitate it. And that means you
Mhm.
understand it, right? So I like how you're trying to help people see a more systematic and almost like community-based feel of
Mhm.
how to get everyone to embrace their uniqueness, to actually add their unique value with everyone else. Love
I
that.
have a question, and it's a little off
Sure.
subject, but maybe not. So you had mentioned that a lot of people with neurodivergent children are realizing that they probably were neurodivergent as kids too. When I hear about the way that school settings are now, it seems like teachers are overwhelmed, the classrooms are
Mhm.
too large, the behavioral issues are worse than ever. If all of us were likely, not all of us, if many of us were likely neurodivergent growing up and we were unmedicated and didn't have tools, how is it worse now? I'm not understanding where did we fall off to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I have some things that are my own personal opinion, and then I have some data like grounded in research as well. Um, I think our society has changed, right? And so what we expect from children, whether better or not, is different. I was talking with my mother, and one thing she said, she's like, "You were like difficult and had, your own kind of way." But she's like, your daughter is like so much more than you. It's like, yeah, she's part of the badger generation, Gen Alpha. That's what they're called because they're mean. Um, and so some of that though is being socialized, right? And so I think about that. I think about also within that, I definitely have ADHD. There's no question. My students will tell you I have ADHD. I have executive dysfunction. Um, However, when I was a kid, it was back in the late 80s, early 90s, my electronic content was a Nintendo NES, and I liked the power pad where you had to run.
Mm,
But also you could get kind of bored on that thing. Like there's only so much you
yeah.
can do on it. And my TV I could consume as what was ever on Saturday morning or after school for 2 hours. And yeah, I could watch a movie, but I could only watch it so many times. And so I was not sitting on these things and being passively entertained. I was out engaging in activity, peer interaction, having to look them in the face. So when I did do something that's a faux pas, I like get that feedback instead of through a computer where maybe they're just silent. And so I
Hmm.
think one of the things that we're looking at, and there is some research to suggest this, is like the amount, how we socialize is so different. So some of these self-regulation skills are being learned in a different way, or they're being stunted to some degree. Um, I think honestly, and I don't think, the pandemic did a few things for us all. And I was, both my husband and I were working through the pandemic and trying to take turns. And my son, who's 5 years older than his sister, loves to tell people how I made him teach his sister. I was like, no, kid, I was trying to entertain you and her and itself contained together without being on a TV screen all day when I'm trying to
Yeah.
work. but I can tell you my kids consumed a lot of media during that time. They did not have the peer interaction. It was stressful. I was stressed and cranky because when you're trying to multitask, it's hard. Um, and so that is another thing we're kind of seeing coming out is a lot harder. Um, then the other thing is too is how we're dealing with behaviors, which I think we're in the right direction, but I think we need to look at these in different ways. But I remember in school, like if we had kids who had really big behaviors, right, they were segregated. Um, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's actually not good. And I think it's good that we're not segregating. But with a lot of the kids that we work with, like there are kids we work with that maybe when we start working with a team, they're clearing a classroom 3 or 4 times a week. If I'm a teacher and I have to get all of my students out of the classroom, try to manage this behavior, ensure safety, and I don't have sufficient training and resources to do it,
Hmm.
then of course I'm going to be stressed and overwhelmed. And so I think there's some things that we're moving in the right direction. Don't think we're resourcing it appropriately. Like, yeah, let's keep these kids in the classroom, but we need to have appropriate plans. We need to have contingency management. We have to have staffing to manage some of these behaviors that we might have managed in the past through segregation.
Hmm.
I know with a lot of the parenting advice that I've heard over the years, I also have two ADHD children. So we're all in a fun boat together here. Um, the biggest piece that I've heard from them is the best thing you can do for your children is to regulate yourself first. And I feel
Mhm.
like, that's another piece that I feel was missing in my childhood. Nobody was talking about emotional regulations or big
Ouch.
feelings or anything like that. So, now we're supposed to be learning how to regulate ourselves and our divergent children. Like, what? How are we supposed to be doing this, Katrina?
That's a great question. And this is one where I get really excited about this topic because like you said, when you're doing it with your own kids, it's a different story than teaching it. And I've actually really learned the value of that parent work through
Hmm.
my practice and through my own experience. Whereas before I may have been like, here's how behavior works, and really focus on behavior. And now when I work with families and parents, it's like, let's talk about what's going on for you. And when I'm telling you to do this behavioral strategy, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's going to be really hard? When is it going to be hard to follow through on this thing? And so there's a couple different things that are not foolproof. So first of all, I say before we get anywhere in teaching any strategies, I'm like, give yourself some grace because at the end of the day, I have not met a parent who hasn't yelled at their children. So
Brene Brown
maybe
claims that she didn't.
I don't believe her.
I have a
Maybe
hard
she
time
didn't.
believing it myself.
And maybe she might be the outlier, but I'm gonna be honest. That's not where I'm putting my standard because I
Yeah.
can I have a tendency to skew towards perfectionism. Perfectionism isn't particularly helpful, but something we know. So I'm like, I am going to be um messy and do my best and work on the skills. And I'm going to give myself the cookie for working on it,
Yeah.
attempting it, and repairing. So,
Well,
Oh,
the
I love
repair.
that. I
uh-huh.
love that.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I heard you say, yeah, the repair.
Yeah.
It's
That's one
it's
of the things
gonna happen.
Gabor Mate talks about that a lot in
Mhm,
his book, The Myth of Normal.
mhm,
Like the repair, that's like not only was emotional regulation never spoke
mhm,
about in my childhood either, but
mhm,
repair, I don't think I heard the words "I'm sorry" out of my mother's mouth until I was like 23. And I remember walking
mhm,
home and hearing it in a voicemail and like stopping because I was so like caught off guard. And but it doesn't model how to repair for the kid either, right? And
mhm,
that's why I think one of the messages I remember reading about in one of Renee's book was like, if you want to be a good parent, be a good person. Because
Hmm.
what you are, your kids are watching you even when you don't think they're watching you. So like if you're gonna be judgmental about some person at the school and you're gonna say that in front of them, like they're gonna like attach more to like what you're doing versus what you're saying.
Hmm.
So if
Mm.
you want to be a good parent and you want to be a good parent, you want to raise good kids, be a good person, and that starts with doing your work. And to your point, like I don't think it's realistic to think that you're not going to yell at your kid, but if you do or when you do, the repair is the attempt to model and build trust.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing too. It's modeling, when we have neurodivergent kids and my for my kids, they also have anxiety and the emotionality is part of it. And so that's where I often focus on because that's my example. That is my personal one. And what I say to my kids is like, okay, here's the situation. This is a stressor. The stressor, it is what it is, right? Now, here's what I did and what I should have done differently. Now, I'm going to throw it to you because I think you can practice the same. So, model. Now, you see if you can engage in the behavior. So, we all are working on accepting responsibility. And I say, okay, so we apologize, say, I'm sorry. Here's what I did. Here's what I should have done. I'm sorry for that. Now, let's talk about two things. One is, how do we move forward? But then also, what do we need to do next time? Because I want to talk to you about how I can support you. Now, with that, sometimes my daughter say, well, maybe you shouldn't. And I was like, oh, wait, just a second. I am going to tell you to hurry up in the morning when we've got 5 minutes and you haven't gotten dressed. Okay. I need you on the bus. So do not tell me not to rush you because, girlfriend, I need you on the bus. I got to go to work.
Mm.
So I can't do that. So I'm also honest. I was like, here's my boundary. I can't do that. But I'm like, so I saw the situation start where we were having a hard time getting out of bed.
Mm.
So is there a way I can help you get out of bed that's a
Mm.
little less aversive than me coming in over and over again saying, get up, get up, get up. Let me get the spray bottle. What are we going to do? Come on, let's go.
Literally.
My dad
I
used
know
to.
My mom too.
some people cringe. I said that in somebody's face. One of my students, I think they're like, oh my gosh. But then my kid's psychiatrist turned and she's like, well, you didn't get up. I was like, see,
Yeah.
she knows.
Normal.
I think it depends on their age, probably.
It does. It does. And whether they've parented.
It's true.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I look at that piece quite a bit. I think, but
I
the other
like
thing is oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I like what you were saying about throwing it back to them to take some responsibility because my kids love to find a reason to just blame
Mhm.
me. And I tell them all the time, like, look, I don't mind admitting what part I did, but I need you to look at yourself too. Like, I tell them, own your shit. So they say that now.
Own
They'll,
your shit.
they'll tell each other, own your shit.
Yeah. I love that.
I do too. I ironically I have one the funny thing is it is a different behavior, but it functions the same. Both of my kids have perfectionism and fear of negative evaluation. That's pretty significant. And so my son deals with it by saying, having a meltdown, saying, I'm so stupid, I can't do anything, and
Mm.
self-deprecating. But that function has a function of tell me otherwise, right? And so it sounds harsh, but I will tell him, I was like, that's not a good way of coping. Let's try again. And it sounds harsh, but I was like, that is not appropriate coping. And it makes me uncomfortable to hear you say those things, and I need to deal with that discomfort. But also, like, let's look at the function of that behavior. My daughter, on the other hand, says, nope. It's better when she was in kindergarten, she would hide under a desk, cover her ears, and start singing when her teacher would reprimand her. So we've come a long way. She used to avoid it. And now it's like we're engaging in essentially exposure therapy. She has to say, I did something wrong. I'm not perfect.
Mm.
Oh,
And I'm going to work on it. So
Yeah.
we've
yeah.
gotten better. We've gotten better.
That's so cute. Kids are so cute, and I think it's so interesting how we have like automatic things that we go to even as like really little kids, and that was something I realized having kids. Like I remember the first kid I ever worked with was a 4-year-old who was avoidant and she just didn't want to talk about anything uncomfortable. And anytime I brought something up, she would immediately change the subject. And she was so good, she got me many times. I was like, damn it, we were supposed to be talking about this. And I was shocked at the time that a 4-year-old would be so skilled in something like that. And then I had my own kids and I realized, oh, they like come out with these these maladaptive, if you will, like all of us humans have maladaptive coping skills. And I know you and I had kind of talked a little bit beforehand, and we were talking about the role of mindfulness. So I'm curious how that plays into all of this that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I told you that there's going to be like 4 or 5 stories. It all comes back around eventually. Um, so thinking about mindfulness and working with families, even before we get to those points where I say, hey, what are the places where you're going to have a hard time? We talk about why it's hard.
Mm,
And I say, let's start with what are your values? And one that has come up a lot in therapies where I'm seeing a lot of push pull with parent child dyads and relationships is when a parent, one of their values is respect, and their child does not hold that same value.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, what with that value of respect, let's first of all kind of talk about what are those, choice points? What are those places where that value is going to be really important to you? And it's going to cause a place where you can engage in a way that's helpful and adaptive and engages in growth for both you and your child, or maybe can be a setback for both you and your child. And so we really work on that self monitoring. So, for example, if I have the value of respect, I say, that's your value, that's not theirs. So, your values are for you. And yes, you are parenting this child. So, you want to engender these same things, but that's your value. So, what are you going to do not to command respect, but to show respect? And so we start thinking about how do we use those values, and are we using them to judge our actions or the actions of others? And I start with families to start with some of that self-monitoring. And I say, I want you to look for places where maybe you had a blow up with your child or you got really frustrated and didn't know what to do. I want you to record the situation, look at your values, and say, was it aligned? Was your behavior aligned with your values or not?
ugh.
And also, why? Because it's usually a values mismatch is where a lot of this conflict comes from.
Hmm.
So we work on the self-monitoring, and we do that by sometimes it's post hoc, after the fact. I'm going to look at it. I have to think about it. I have to go back to that situation and think about, why did that make me so upset? Why was that bothersome? Um, but then we also look at what are some of your things that make you uncomfortable. These might not be values, but for me, time. And I've been that person. I hate being late, even if it doesn't matter. And I can feel my anxiety start to rise, especially because I do. We all have ADHD in our house, but I just have one who doesn't care about time. And so I'm like, let's go. And I say, like, okay, how am I going to monitor? Because I know these situations are stressful for me. And so when I think about this, I think about what are the strategies to self-monitor. We're all really bad at that, actually, naturally, as human beings. People are not good at self-monitoring and
When
being
I think about
introspective.
parenting,
Oh,
that
yeah.
sounds like a nightmare to have to record yourself in a, in a
Uh,
situation and look at whether or not it aligns with your values.
yeah.
Like, oh,
It makes you think about it, but that causes discomfort, right? It makes you like, oh,
okay,
I don't want to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
right, yeah.
But the other thing is I say, like, what are the strategies we're going to use? The one that I end up using the most myself, but also see my clients using, I'm like, do you have a partner? Do you have an like any kind of accountability partner, whether that's someone like your grandparents or a spouse or a significant other, the neighbor next door who hears you listens to you yell at your kids once a week, whoever that person is. And I say, ask them to help. And this is one where my husband and I both worked on this because we both, um, despite me having ADHD, he definitely does not, but we're both very type A personalities. And so we have to kind of help each other. Like if we see the other person is starting to escalate, we're like, you got to take the break. And if anybody has ever had a significant other tell them to take a break, there's nothing more infuriating.
Yeah, that's not going to go well. That's like somebody telling you to calm down. What?
It is the same. Yes.
Yeah. It's like, tell me to get angrier, then I might calm
Yeah.
down, you
And
know?
then and so we've had to practice it and discuss it. And we practice it actually in places that are where we're not escalated, or it's like I'm excited about something and I have a tendency, as you probably can hear right now, to get really excited and talk about something a lot. He's like, wait, I think you take a break. And I'm like, oh, but I'm up here, my emotions are here, I'm excited. And I have to practice regulating and waiting, which is hard for some of us. Um, and taking a break. So we implement some practice for some of these things outside of those situations with our children. Not always with great success, sometimes with better success than others. Um, but it's an agreement that we have that we're going to do these things, and it's going to be hard and it's going to make us uncomfortable. And it's important to both of us because we know we need to practice it because we both um, can be a little hot under the collar with, with practice.
Well, even
Um, yeah.
with my partner, I'll be like, all right, I'm getting really upset. I need you to step in. And he was interpreting that as me making him the disciplinarian. And I was like, no, I want you to come in as the calm person because I am not calm right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
I think that's so important too. Like you said, it's like having the plan ahead of time. And so when I work with families, I do, we write down the values, we write down the homework, we write down the plan. I even have little key rings with like scripts. It's like when your child does this, pull out the script and you're going to say this, and you're going to say it this many minutes. And okay, now the calm down procedure. Once they're calmed down, you're going to give them this many minutes before you check in. And then this is what you're going to say. And so we prescribe it a little bit because we're going to naturally fall back into
Mhm.
what's habitual, right? Habits are habits for a reason. They just happen. Like we don't think about it, we just do it. Um, and to make us start thinking first, that stop think, we've got to make it easier. And so it's like, what are the ways we can make it easier? Both for your kid and for you.
Yeah.
um, in appropriate ways. So, you know.
I really like the practice component
Mhm,
that you were expressing you and your husband do
mhm,
because I think a common gap in the
mhm,
work is like we can scroll on TikTok or Instagram and diagnose ourselves about what we
mhm,
have and like how we should be different, but the actual integration of it requires
mhm,
like putting your body in motion for your nervous system to learn like, oh, okay, this is survival. It's exposure therapy, really, right?
mhm,
So and to your point about like some things go better that sometimes it's more successful than others, like
mhm.
that's called learning, right? So like it's even
Yeah.
how you articulate it is like we set a plan, we make a commitment and we agree to it. We understand why we're practicing it, what we're doing. We're not starting at like the worst case scenario. We're actually starting in positive experiences to create a more positive relationship to the actual skill we're trying to build. And then it's still uncomfortable to your point to like
Oh
pause
yeah.
and wait and bring yourself back down. But this way you don't turn against him because he's, telling you to calm down. It's like, okay, no, this was our shared commitment and he's holding me accountable just as I'm holding him accountable. And it feels like you're not alone in it.
But I think, and that's another thing too, where my husband and I have kind of talked about too, how we deal with our children is a little bit different. Like we had one, but my son who also has ADHD made some choices at the beginning of the school year. He's a sophomore in high school. Choices bite you in the butt pretty fast when you make them. Um, and so he was having a moment where he was escalated and started going to self-deprecation. Like we're trying to coach him before we need to get out the door for a doctor's appointment. And my husband, because I needed a minute because I was heightened because I've got some other stuff going on. And I came in and I said, wait. And I was like, and I just kind of like did more of the, that's not effective. You need to get calmed down. And probably not the most calm way. However, for a kid who was spiraling, he needed somebody to come in, kind of shock the system. This is what you need to do. This is the expectation. Your dad is telling you to breathe. He's trying to coach you. You don't have to be coached by him, but you do need to stop spiraling. That's not a choice. Um, if my husband had done that with my son, it would not have gone well.
Yeah.
Mm.
You guys
And so
never
it
practice with your kids?
with the stopping and everything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Our kids, my poor children. I'm like, I do this for a living. I also tell them like, people pay me $200 an hour to get what you're getting for free. But
No.
sorry,
You're
I shouldn't
so
say that to
lucky,
them.
kid.
I do. It's not, that is an example of what not to say. But we do. I say like, listen, like here's the literature, here's what works. We know what works. Um, you're not going to do it without some coaching. You're not going to do it without practice.
Hmm.
And so we do, we have some skills we're working on. And so my kids are 10 and 15. And so they have very different skills and very different people, despite having the same diagnoses. Um, and so we say, how are we going to work on this right now? And we do this about once a week. We come up with a plan. And we say, here's what we're struggling with. Here's what we're going to do this week. Usually it's a continuation of what we've been doing. But then we also talk about what we're all going to do. And I say, like, this is hard for me. I will tell my kids, it's like, I'm feeling very frustrated right now because I do know this. I do know what the literature says. I do know it can work. I do know it is hard. And I know I can't make you do it. And that's what makes me frustrated. And
Hmm.
so we model that and then we practice it. Stopping, scaffolding, all of that.
Hmm.
Some weeks better than others. I want to I'm talking about this. I'm like I'm making myself sound like I'm really successful at it. Sometimes we're just a hot mess and that's okay too. And that's
It's
life.
human.
When
It's
I
human.
first had kids, some people said like, "Oh, you should write a parenting book," some of my clients, and I was like, no. I am not the person to write a parenting book." I said, "And if I did, it would be called It's a Shit Show." So, I feel you on what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like being a professional doesn't mean that you can do it all perfectly all the time.
No. And
No,
you're not supposed to. That's not
no,
human.
you're not.
No. Like, do you remember
Mhm,
Dr. Dan Siegel? He talks about
mhm,
one of the moments when he got triggered when his son, his newborn son, was crying and like he didn't have the tolerance and he was like really like beating himself up over it because he's a professional, right?
mhm,
And through talking to some colleagues and kind of doing his work, what he realizes during his shift in the NICU where they had to like literally pin down newborn babies and like give them shots and hearing their screams was so traumatizing for him so that when his newborn started crying, like it triggered the trauma response. So here's a professional who thinks he should be able to do all this and just as a human being will be, his humanity was coming through and creating the block. I think it's like I don't have children, but what I continually hear when I listen to parents is one, everyone feels like they're doing it wrong, and most people feel like they're doing their best.
Mm.
mhm.
And if you want to do the best by your kids, do the work on yourself. Like those are the
Yeah.
common messages that I get is like the systems are screwed up, the world is screwed up, people are screwed up. It's all a shit show.
Mhm.
Contribution to your book
Thank you.
that we're like coexisting in. What we can do is
Mhm,
help our kids be good human beings that can contribute to humanity by being
mhm,
one ourselves and taking accountability for our humanity, which means our failures, where we get it wrong, when we yell and we don't want to, and like
mhm,
not pretending like we have to be the strong one, but letting them know like your emotions aren't a problem. Your you know, spiciness isn't a problem.
mhm,
Like who you are isn't a problem. It's about learning
mhm,
the skill sets to be with yourself and adapt through those challenging moments. Just like trying to fill the skill or the gaps with the systems, right? It's the same thing with
Yeah.
your internal system and then how that interlocks with the family systems.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, it's like kids are actually far more resilient than people give them credit for. Because I just think about I've been doing this now since I was 19, and I am definitely not that age anymore. But I think about some of the kids that I've worked with different diagnoses and capacities and everything. And some of these things that seem like such a big deal, like when they're kids and they're 5, 10, 15, whatever, and they seem like huge behavior problems. And everyone's like, we got to fix this. When they get to be adults, it's fine. Like there's variation in the population. We're good at different things. And it's one of those things too where I often tell people like my job is not to have perfect children. My job is to help them grow up to be good adults. And I think that's something that I also tell parents a lot of times. It's like you're focused on like this, it feels big, but and I fell into this trap too, where I was like, as the professional, I was like, oh my gosh, everyone's judging my ability as a parent based on my kid's behavior at school. And
Mm.
I'm like, but the school needs to do some different things, maybe. Um, but I kind of got to that point where I was like, okay, it's not that big of a deal because we move through it, we work through it, and we're on the end of that one, we're on to the next one.
I
Yeah.
remember that exact thought process with my oldest. She's my more intense child, shall we say. And we would be struggling with a behavior and struggling with a behavior, and then all of a sudden it just changed. And it felt like it didn't really matter which strategy we used. Not one way or another. It's like she kind of grew out of it. Like, I don't know. We tried many different things with any of the problem behaviors. And I don't know that any one was more successful than the other. And it felt like this just changed one day. Like, what the heck?
Well, and I think it's a mindset as well. And with the types of clients that I work with, I tell them as like my our goal right now is not for this behavior to go away or this problem to go away, or I'm gonna make your kid less intense and they're gonna be easy and you're not ever gonna need therapy again. What we're gonna work on is how do we manage it right now
Yeah.
so maturation can do some work and you don't come out worse, you come out better. So when maturation does the work, you'll all of a sudden see this huge growth. And that's where I tell people sometimes the behavior plan, you see it work in the moment over time, and it's like, oh, look, behavior's better. But we also see it's like, I feel like I'm working really hard at it. But then over the course of 2 weeks, it's I don't need to use this plan anymore because maturation did its job and we had one of those little cusp um, skills develop or their brain kind of hit one of those points of rapid development in an area. And so it's being okay with what we're going to do is going to manage it
Mm.
and not fix it. And I think that's the thing is when people start saying like it's not working because it's not fixed, I was like, no, everyone has behavior, everyone has a thing they're working on. This is the thing you're working on.
That's a
And so
really
we're
cool
going to manage
perspective.
it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a really cool perspective. We're gonna get through this. What we're gonna do.
Uh,
Um, but I do hear a lot of mindfulness in what you're saying because you're
Mhm.
talking about paying attention to your own emotions, paying attention to when you need a break, paying attention to your communication with your supports, paying attention to your communication with your kid. And there's just a lot of it that's you need to increase your awareness of yourself and the dynamics between you and other people.
Mhm.
are we talking about presence? Like when I'm like, yes, it's mindfulness, yes, it's awareness,
Mhm.
but aren't we talking about like being present where you are, being present with
Mhm.
yourself, being present with your kids?
Yeah. And that's all can I always think about those present moment mindfulness, right? We it's being aware, recognizing, if you're in that place of true psychological flexibility, right?
Hmm.
It's you're aware that you're viewing the world through a lens. You're aware that you are separate from the situation. You are separate from your actions. You are the self is a different entity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things is like truly being present is saying like I'm experiencing this and I'm here right now and I'm working through it and I'm fully focused and engaged. Now, we're not going to be there all the time because that's
No,
impossible.
because we're human.
Because we're human. But the more we can be present, we can work through that. We can also have perspective. Um, so I think that's one of those things where I agree. It's being there, but awareness takes a lot of work and practice and a lot of mental capacity.
I think that
I
piece you just mentioned, I'm sorry, Laura, I'll let you go next, about having a separate self identity and then kind of almost like letting go of that and observing.
Mhm.
I love that. That's like consciousness stuff right there. But what were you going to say, Laura?
I was gonna say I like the reason I shifted it towards the word presence versus mindfulness and awareness is because when you hear parents talk about time with their kid, they talk about, I want to be present. I want to be connected. And like, yes, there are hard moments. And again, don't have kids, not going to pretend I understand what it's like and what that challenge is like. But what I also hear is how fast time goes. So I guess when I think about it from a space of presence, yes, there's the challenge of having to intentionally direct your attention to be where you are and not let the millions of distractions around us kind of pull at you. But when I hear it, it seems like it's also a value add as much as it's also work,
Mhm.
right? So it's yes, I have to direct my attention, but I do value being present with my kids. Back to the whole
Mhm.
value equation. And I want to take actions in alignment with my value of presence. So, like, that's being present with myself, and that's recognizing when I'm heightened and taking a break or whatever that might be. And maybe that presence is to be like, okay, let me take a step out of myself and stop identifying as this emotion or stop identifying with this thought and observe the thought, observe the emotion, and be curious for
Mhm.
myself about, okay, what is the purpose of this emotion or thought for me? And like, what is this bringing up so that I can actually show up,
Mm,
Mhm.
as how I would want them to, right? Like the modeling of being present, but also seeing your own self concepts with purpose.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing too, is kind of when you approach it that way, like how you described it as perfect, because I was like, yes, that's exactly what we, it's almost like transcendence, right?
Yeah.
Um, but when we do that, there's also so much value in every moment. So even those hard moments. And I think about like, we often talk about you need the hard moments. So the good moments, you can see how good they are. But also some of the times where I've built my relationship the most with my own children or had those moments of like kind of like that overflowing like compassion and love and joy is like after we're working through something and we kind of everyone's come down and because we're working on that relationship or focus on it, you kind of almost feel like that
The building.
it's hard to describe. You feel it in your
Yeah.
chest and it's like it's coming out. And you can't have that without being present and being grateful for even the hard times. And I also think about like this some of the stuff that is the most difficult to manage for my kids, honestly, are some of their greatest strengths.
Hmm.
Like for my son, he gets overwhelmed easily, but he's like the most compassionate person ever. And my daughter is rigid and she's headstrong, and it's kind of my way or the highway kid. But I was like, man, that's gonna be great for you when you are 25 and taking over the world.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's
so
the
it's like I
point,
wouldn't
right?
change
Like
it.
it might be challenging for you in that moment,
Mhm.
but it's still a valuable life skill that can have
Yeah.
benefit outside of this container. And I know, I forget where I heard it, if it was in a book or a podcast, but
Mhm.
I heard someone say when she approaches parenting specifically through adverse moments, she thinks through how can I approach this so that my kid wants to go through storms with me?
oh,
And
Ooh.
I really liked that frame
yeah.
because, like,
Uh-huh.
if you think about sports teams or military, like,
Mhm.
there is a degree of bonding in navigating challenging terrain together. So, how
Mhm.
can I show up in this moment so my kid wants to go through storms with me? I don't know. I just love that frame.
I
That's
think that is
beautiful.
awesome too. I
Yeah.
don't know if I've mastered that yet, but
I don't
Girl.
I
think there's
think
such a
it's a
thing
good
as
one.
mastery. I think it's literally effort and learning and intentionality and presence and
I bet you
doing it with
have.
the kids.
Here's why I think you have. I've worked a lot with teenagers. I love working with teenagers. They crack me up. But one of the things, obviously, teenagers are incredibly difficult according to everyone. I haven't gotten there yet, and I'm terrified. But one of the things that I've noticed is that as soon as they get off to college, they are looking at their parents differently. And they're like, oh, adulting, it's only pseudo adulting in college, anyways. Whether they go to college or they get a job, whatever the story is for their life, once they start even pseudo adulting, they're like, oh shit, this is hard. I feel bad for my parents have been doing this whole time. And it really starts to shift their perspective. And before you know it, they start coming to you for advice. It's wild.
Yep. You just got to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're in the throes of the teenage. So, because you
Oh
got
yeah.
the 10, which is like right
Tough.
around puberty
Oh
time.
yeah. No, we are
Oh,
there. We
yeah,
are there.
girl.
The emotions are real.
All right. Well, we have to roll for today. I am so, so grateful that you were able to join us today. I actually usually hate talking about parenting because it feels like so rough so often. But you actually made me feel comfortable during this experience, so I appreciate that very much. And thank you for the wisdom and the nuggets that you gave us today. How do we
Sure.
find you, and your work?
Yeah. So you can find best way to find me is at Beyond the Individual. So www.beyondtheindividual.com. It's our clinic webpage. We are on Facebook, Insta, and LinkedIn. To follow me professionally, I am on LinkedIn. Try to put something out there once a week or so, but um, yeah. So that's the best way to find me. And thank you guys so much. This was the most fun I've had getting to talk about said things. So
Yay. Love that for us.
I appreciate
Awesome.
it.
All right. Thank you, and we will see you online.